Hello there. How are you doing? Hope you're all doing great. Welcome to an episode of My English Podcasts. My name is Parham, and we are going to learn English from any single material that is relatable to English, like films, actors, of course their speeches, books, quotes, and so on. And hopefully they could help you with English. So without further ado, let's dive into this episode. So, in this episode, I'm gonna talk about personality and some relevant stuff to that about which we all talk in our discussions with other people. First of all, before getting started, there's something which we all want to know. We all wonder how our character and personality has been formed or is being formed. So, there's one thing. Nature, nurture, controversy. Which kind of shows which one plays a more important role in forming our character. We're going to see whether nature or nurture would be a more significant factor in forming our character. So, before starting on that, let's kind of discuss the concept of the word personality. So we're going to figure out how the word personality is defined. Well, different people might define the word personality in their own words, but generally, personality shows your usual manners, or let's say the way you appear in several different circumstances. It kind of shows what kind of person you are. So it depicts your character. So now we generally know what personality is. So now let's dive into nature, nurture, controversy. So nature, as we all know, refers to genes and genetic factors, like your inborn abilities and traits. For example, you're born with your kind of, for example, your blue eyes, or some kind of abilities that you can do even when you're a kid. And there are some things that you learn, for example, from your parents. So there's something that actually has been asserted, and it shows that some kind of activities that we might be up to later in the future might be inherited from our parents, or genes. Even criminal activities or stuff like that, has been, they're thought to kind of be inherited from genes as well. So we're going to see in today's world whether or not nurture would be a more important factor in shaping our values and forming our character. So, first of all, we all know that the first years of our life, parents play a vitally important role in shaping our values, because children are always recording stuff and they kind of try to imitate what their parents are up to in different situations, circumstances, while grappling with hassles, obstacles, and how they sort of deal with irritations, everyday irritations. So they kind of, we kind of keep in mind how they react to whatever that happens in their everyday life. So it would be one thing that might be that might show the power of nurture. But nature, as I told you before, would be important as well. It might appear sometimes, a little bit more powerful than nurture, because we all see that in society people are appearing with their innate talent when they are actually when they are interviewed, when after they've applied for a particular position or job in a kind of in an office or in an organization or something. So it kind of could indicate your innate talents or inborn abilities. So, in different aspects of life, we can see that the emergence of your natural abilities could also be shown to people. So not only nurture, but also nature could let other people know, and also let you know how your character or personality has been formed. So whenever you're thinking about how or where your character, your personality comes from, you can kind of, take different factors into account. So we can see that people are either introverted or extroverted. So if you want to consider it as a kind of like a continuum, at one end we've got introversion, and at the other end we've got extroversion. So we can say that, some people aren't entirely introverted, and not all people are 100% extroverted. So some people might settle somewhere in the middle, when it comes to that kind of continuum. So this kind of a character, I believe that it could also be influenced by nurture, even whether or not you're extroverted or introverted. So first of all, considering your genes or your traits, when you're a kid, you appear to be some kind of like introverted. You kind of, represent your introversion whenever you turn up in kind of like a public place. Whenever you're talking to people, you show that you're calm, your emotions are controlled. But later on, when you just enter different kind of communities, you actually are a mature person in society. So you come across different people with different mindsets, so the nurture could also manipulate your brain. So after a short period of time wandering around that kind of, in that place, in that atmosphere, your thoughts might be either terribly or tremendously inspired or influenced by other people. So this is the power of nurture, which is most of the time underestimated. So as a matter of fact, another point would be actually about siblings. We see that nowadays many people are, actually they have either brothers or sisters or even both. So at first, the birth order effect could also influence their personality. So the first one is some kind of independent, much more than the others, because parents are not as much experienced in raising their children, so they might appear some kind of super strict when it comes to just growing up their children. So it might be one of the reasons that the first person could somehow be independent, more ambitious, and kind of relentless. But the rest, I mean, the second one would be the most. I don't know. As far as I know, the second one would be kind of the kindest, or kind of like the funniest person in the family. But with the last one, because the family have enough experience in raising their children, they may not appear as much strict, and it might get more and more lenient. So the person becomes some kind of rebellious. The disobedience of their children might be rooted in their parents' reactions, or let's say the nurture, the environment in which they're in, in which they're kind of they're living in. The atmosphere of their family and also the environment they're in could play an important role in your traits. So that's why we consider, considering the current families, we consider, the last child would be sort of a native of this digital world. So that's why that person might be disobedient to what their parents say to their parents, and they no longer obey the rules. They break the rules and they want to be independent. So whatever they're told, if they're ordered to do something, as long as they are not comfortable, if they're not alright with that, they don't do that at all. So this would be sort of the power of the atmosphere and the environment you live in. So this is another issue. And another point that would be worth talking about would be our weaknesses and strengths. You know, I myself used to wonder if our strengths and weaknesses would be related to our personality or something, because you're born with some weaknesses and strengths, and you might grow up with those abilities and stuff like that. And sometimes they can't, we can't do anything about those you know weaknesses. So we're gonna see how possibly nurture or nature would help us with those weaknesses. So there are a lot of shortcomings when it comes to people and their lives. You might be disorganized, a procrastinator. You may not be able to concentrate on your tasks, on whatever. So these are some kind of shortcomings that everybody talks about. So I think that these are rooted in your character, sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly. So it is believed that nowadays people are dealing with more of an IQ, especially teenagers. So I've been told that nowadays those teenagers who are energetic, hyperactive, they are more likely to just throw away their clothes, and they're always everywhere, and their bedroom is a clutter every time you visit their house, and then their bedroom. So it's kind of a mess every time. So it's kind of it kind of has a lot to do with their character, I think. So um if I think it's a part of your character, something is a part of your character, and you've grown up with that, it would be some kind of tough to do something about it. But if you find out that something is wrong with what you're doing as you're grown up, the younger you are, the easier it becomes to just wipe it out. Once you start doing something about that, it might well, it may well vanish forever. So, but if you are an adult and you've been grappling with all of those weaknesses, all of those shortcomings for a long period of time, you sort of got used to it, and it's a part of your character. And it can't sort of help, it can't do anything to just sort out a problem, because they're no longer weaknesses. They turn into problems when you are an adult person. So um not only your weaknesses, but also so your strengths might open a can of worms in the future, because when you uh, are talking about your strengths when you're a kid, when you make a big issue out of it, when you just ah, when you want to take much on your strengths and something like that, when you get older, you may get carried away. You may not be as much qualified to do something, and you want to just count on your strengths before breaking into a kind of like career or something like that. So you may well screw up before even starting out your job. So your strengths could also be controlled as you're growing up. So if you try to work on yourself and try not to get caught up, you know, both when you're a kid and when you're mature enough to be a part of the society. So I think it pays off. Do you know what I mean? So this is something that we're all grappling with. You know, the confidence of youth and how it could bring about a lot of problems, because it's kind of, the confidence of youth could be both beneficial and problematic, considering the conditions of society and where you're living in. So if you try not to just get carried away as you go further on this path, everything would be alright. Because we all need to live together. We all need to just socialize with other people. Just try to just boost our sociability. So it could help us with so many problems, so many weaknesses. So, this problem I'm going to talk about is mostly for introverted people, because they are apt, they have the aptitude to just keep things inside without even, bringing it up, even if they're talking to us kind of like a psychologist or something. They're more likely just to just keep it inside. They're not inclined to talk about it, to just let other people know what's irritating them so they can't do something. And then, the more that you keep it inside, the more you're kind of, you're disturbed. Your emotions are disturbed, and you're burdened by all of those irritations and all of those thoughts that you've kept inside. So I think that these are all about your personality. So when you're born with something which could possibly be problematic, you have to just wipe it out as soon as possible. Because so many problems, if you're cautious enough, if you try to just be, consciously try to let those children behave in a way which could indicate any possible problems they may have in the future. Because if there's a problem, any serious problem, any inborn trait that may not be appropriate for for the society you're in or something like that. So you have to just try to just help that person with those problematic traits, because it is something he or she was born with. But if there's something you realize in your adulthood, it's something that nurture has formed in your character. So it is an entirely different thing to discuss. But nature sometimes indirectly manipulates your personality. And this is something, very complex. But data indicates that nature and nurture could both be the factors that form our character. We can't say that just nurture would be the only factor that could shape our values, or let's say nature is the main factor that shows us where our character or personality comes from. So considering the statistics and what experts have told us, both nature and nurture could determine what kind of person you are. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know if there's anything related to your personality that I've mentioned in this episode. Let me know how much of your character was